Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to do something completely different than what I normally do. Um, I think there's a couple of videos up on the channel about um, my sailboat. For those that you don't know, I do race sailboats here locally, and during the summer we can get anywhere from 15 to 25 races in a year. We don't do well at it, but we have fun. So that's kind of what it's about. Um, but I am not a lifelong sailor. I have been sailing just over about 11 and a half years. It was the first time I ever stopped in a sailboat. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about kind of how I got into sailing and the adventure that I went on exactly 11 years ago today. I was sitting on the Mississippi on a sailboat with very little experience whatsoever on my way to Belize. So that's what we're going to talk about here in the next little bit. If it's not something you're interested in, that's fine. And if it is something you like, great. That's good too. So let's jump into it and talk about where we're going. All right, so I think first thing we'll do is we'll talk about the boat itself. So this is a 33.5-foot Hunter. It is a wing keel. I believe it was built in the mid 80s. I just don't remember at this point in time. My friend of mine bought the boat in the fall of 2010 it was out in New York. He had it shipped out here to Minneapolis in Minnesota and sat over the winter, and then in the spring of 2011 we went out there and spent the summer rehabbing the boat and learning to sail because neither one of us had been on a sailboat before. So we spent as much time that spring learning how to sail, took a number of sailing classes together, and got as much experience as we could before we jumped on the adventure. So here's a map of kind of the way we went down, and so we went from Minneapolis, Minnesota, actually south of Minneapolis, Minnesota, from Lake City, and we came down the Mississippi until it merges with the Ohio in Cairo, Illinois, right on the very southern tip of Illinois, and then it goes up. We went actually upriver about 50 miles to the Kentucky Dam, and then the Kentucky Dam, we followed that down through Tennessee, in parts of Mississippi and Alabama, and there is a man-made waterway in there called the tenn, and that connects up with the Mobile River and gets us out to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, we did not take, in a subsequent trip, I did a trip 2 years ago where I ran a support crew for a Guinness World Record for paddlers that went from Lake Itasca to the Gulf of Mexico, and we went on the Mississippi. There is, between Cairo and the Gulf of Mexico, there isn't a whole lot of provisions for pleasure sailing. It's really industrial. So it was harder to do, but in the tenn and Kentucky Dam and Mobile was a lot better option for us. So that was the route we chose. From there, we did the crossing, and these are actually our actual routes that were plotted on GPS. And you can see where we come out of Mobile, kind of hang back and forth, and that was because of some of the weather. We'll talk about that as we go along. So I'm going to back up here just a little bit. So here was one of the first times I ever saw the boat. This would have been probably April of 2011. And like I said, the friend bought the boat. We were going to, we spent most of the summer rehabbing it and doing what we could to get the thing as best shape as we could. One of the things is Lake Pepin is a pretty large body of water. on the Mississippi. It's a lake on the Mississippi, and spent a lot of evenings and overnights up there, and kind of fell in love with being on the water. Um, had that not happened, I probably wouldn't have continued on sailing, but we uh, enjoyed that a lot. We barbecued out on the boat. Lori and I spent a bunch of time there, and really kind of fell in love with being on the boat. Um, Anybody that's been on a boat kind of understands that. Um, so after we rehabbed the boat, we spent a couple of things we couldn't do. So this is a picture of a couple of days before taking off out of Lake City. Actually, we took out of Wabasha, which is just south of there. That's a whole different reason why I'm just not going to go into. But this was the boat all prepped up, and the mast that we have, the mast itself is 49 feet, sits about 5 feet off the water. We had a couple of bridges down on the tenn that were at about 52 feet. If you do the math, it's close. Even though it is in the fall, we left on the 28th of October in 2011. We weren't sure that we could make it underneath those, and you only need to be short an inch to have a pretty bad day on a bridge in a sailboat. So we looked at options to shipping the mast down, and finally just came up with, I built this platform with the sea kayaks that stayed up on top of there, and that's what we did. So so one other thing I'm going to do is right now, this is just the morning of the 28th that we're getting ready to leave. I'm going to run through a couple of numbers on this thing. So when we left at on this day, we had about 20 days of on the water experience through various classes and being on the boat and stuff. So not a whole lot of experience to take off on this. So the whole trip was 2,500 miles from here to Key Cocker in Belize, which is an island just off the coast of Belize City. 1,500 of that is by the river, and again we talked about, we went down the Mississippi to the Ohio, up to the Kentucky, through the Tenn to the Mobile, and then out Mobile River, and then out Mobile, Alabama. It took us 40 days, and it was a solid 40 days. It was basically sun up to sundown. We spent 28 days, 25 days to get to Mobile, all on the river. We spent 3 days putting the boat back together, getting provisions, and getting ready for the Gulf crossing. And then it took us 12 days to get that last 1,000 miles across the Gulf of Mexico. Along that, we went through, there's 35 locks that we went through. The bulk of them are between Minneapolis and St. Louis. There is some locks, from St. Louis on, there is no locks on the Mississippi. When we go up the Ohio, there was a couple of locks that we went through. The Kentucky Dam, which is a huge lock that we went through, and then some along the way until we got into Mobile. So we went through 9 different states in the United States. We saw 4 different countries. So when we went down and doing the Gulf crossing, obviously we're in the United States. We went out through the Gulf of Mexico, and because there is a half knot back current from the Gulf Stream along Cuba, that's where we went. And it's if you went on the other side, on the Mexico side, there's a 3.5 knot current going north. And when you're only doing 6 knots, when you pull 3.5 out of that, it makes for a really slow day. So we were happy to get, add some extra miles in, but go around. So if you'd looked, if on that map, you can see that we got really close to Cuba. We could actually see the lights of Cuba. We'll talk about that a little bit more, why we were so close to Cuba. And then into we actually stopped in Mexico, and then on to Belize from there. So our biggest day was south of St. Louis. We did 98.5 miles. And when we were doing 40 and 50 and 60-mile days, that was the difference in the current. We were doing, we'd go from 6 knots in basically, no current, and we were doing 13 to 14 knots heading downstream, which is a little terrifying on a boat of this size when you're really, the river doesn't control the boat more than you are sometimes. So when we did the Guinness trip in a couple of years ago, the thing we always talked about is the river decides, and it really does. The Mississippi is mighty, and it will decide how your day is going to go. So, and here we're departing off. You can see the mast up. This is about 5 o'clock in the morning on the 28th of October 2011, and we're heading off to the site. We did have a small group come out and send us off in the morning, and it was a little unsettling because we didn't know what the adventure was. We knew we were going to have an adventure. We just didn't know what the adventure was. Here one of our friends came around and got us a shot from the other side. One of the things, we did run aground 4 times, and times 3 of those they said we had enough draft, and they were not correct. So here's a little bit of picture of the boat steaming down the river, and this is kind of how we spent most of our days, is just cruising along. We would a typical day was we'd get up, usually Dave would get up ahead of me. We'd get off the anchor, and he would start motoring down, and then I would start coffee as soon as we had daylight at all. And then we were always plotting to get as far south as we could each day. One of the things that we did as we were going along is a lot of the marinas were closing that day. Every time, we kept going south, and we're in October, so we can have pretty cold temperature. We had 2 inches of snow here in Minneapolis, and freezing temperatures a couple of, earlier this week. So the marinas are all locking up, closing their doors, and we're trying to get fuel, we're trying to get provisions as we're going along. So, especially the stuff up in the northern, it got kind of dicey of us actually getting the supplies we needed. So this is the morning of, got big smiles on everybody's faces, and then we're getting ready to go take on an adventure. This is 40 days later and 20 pounds later. We ate really well, but I lost, over 40 days, I lost 20 pounds, and it was not intentional. So I talked earlier, there's 35 locks, and these locks vary hugely in sizes, from dropping a couple of feet, and I believe that the tallest one is, I think it's the entrance onto the tenn tom, but it's been 11 years, so I don't quite remember. It's a 95-foot drop, and that is over, I forget, it's very noticeable when you're going down, when they open the valves to have that drop, you feel that thing dropping. It's a little unsettling, but 95 feet, so you figure 9.5 stories. It's a long ways down there. Most of the time we had great locks. There's times, here's one that you can see. I think this is, I believe this might be Kentucky Dam. After a while they kind of all look the same, but we had 35 of them to get through, and like I said, some of them were like a couple of feet, and some of them were up to 95 feet, and everywhere in between. So this one, I know exactly which one this one. This is at Keokuk. And if you look closely, you can see the waves coming, um, the white on this is looking back out of the boat, and that's the gate coming to lock. That's the waves coming over top of the lock gate. We had it was raining and pouring, and we had some high winds coming out of the north, creating about 3 to 4 foot waves on the coming in from behind. And anybody that's been on a boat that you can go into some pretty big waves going forward. Come up from behind, it can be a lot really unsettling. So when we were doing this, one of the things that happened, we're trying to get tied up on the side of the dock. I think I've got a picture in here of the bollards that we would cook on. Their floating bollards. So we just put a rope around that, and then we would basically, that slid up and down in the water with us, and that's what held us in place, and we just held the boat in place. What we didn't see, because we were paying attention to try to get on the dock, was a wave came in from behind and literally picked up the boat, and we were close enough to the wall of this cement wall, and basically threw the boat up on top of the wall. I came back, and I was doing one of these things. I was like, I still count 10, because I wasn't sure. It was literally picked up the boat and slammed it up against the wall. Luckily, it was everything okay, but it's one of the things that just can happen so quickly when you're trying to do these things. This is one a little bit further north. We had a lot of barges. It's a commercial river. There is a lot of barges. The gate is open, but what you can see is there's another barge that let us get in, but he's basically as close to the edge of the bottom side of the lock as he can be, and still allow us to get out that little window and get out there. So if you have been on the river and you see all those little barges, they're just moving along really slowly, they are not something you want to get underneath. We had an incident. I was at the helm, and we were down. I think we were down in Alabama. I don't remember, but there was parts of these rivers that had these big snake back and forth. So it was just this basically back and forth. So it may be 2 miles by river, but if you cross, it's about a half mile if you walked between the rivers, because it was cutting back on itself. So these really sharp turns, and they had some barges down there, and they don't have a lot of maneuverability. And I'm watching the buoys that are sitting in. So you have your red and green buoys to tell you where the channel is, and we had GPS to figure out where we're at. And I'm watching, and I was like, well, he's getting really close to the buoy on my side of the river, and all of a sudden the buoy goes underneath, because he's cutting the corner that much, which meant I had to go outside into hopefully good water, but you don't know. And it was one of the things that it happened. Also, you get it's like two vehicles coming together on the road, so it was a little unsettling to say the least. So here's another one of those, a picture of the lock sidewalls. So we had so many different marinas, and that was kind of a thing. So this was one, I think this is in Missouri. It's still a little bit of a blur, but there was such a variation in marinas. Here's another one down on the tenn. And that was a fuel dock there. Yeah, so that's the fuel. We decided not to get fuel here. And then the very next night, or actually this is Lake Kentucky. So we'd been to Lake Kentucky. We went to this one, and then I think the following night I got another picture. Oh, here's that same one. So this is one of the pontoons that's tied up alongside of it. I don't know that I would get on that thing, but one of the other things was weather was always an issue, because we were that late in the year. There was morning. I remember one morning, probably some pretty poor judgment on our part, but we needed to get going, and I stood on the bow of the boat and looked out into the fog, and we're driving by GPS, and this is what we could see. The deck, it was below freezing, so it was pretty thick fog. We knew it was going to blow off. As we're going along, we know we were on the southern end of Lake Kentucky, and there's a couple of bridges that are going across there. So I'm out there looking for, we know there's a bridge up there. We can't quite see it. We know where the channel is, and the GPS is pretty accurate. And there's got a fair amount of latitude that you can go, stay within the GPS. And I'm up there, and he's like, it should be right there, it should be right there. And I can't see this bridge. And I turn around and tell him I can't find it, and the bridge is behind us. What they didn't say on the map was that there was a whole section of bridge that had been taken out. It was an old rail bridge, and part of the bridge was still there, part of it wasn't. Well, we went through where the channel was, and that's why I didn't see it. It was just enough off to the side that we just went past it. One of the days, this is an anchor line. So one of the days we're south of St. Louis, and actually it's kind of interesting. There's a section of river south of St. Louis. I think their last stop is called Hoppies. It's the small town, and they've got kind of like a floating pontoon on the side of the river, and that's where you get fuel. But you don't have fuel it's about 100 miles. And there is virtually nothing. Now, one of the things is you don't see any civilization for that 100 miles. You don't see farms. You don't see anything. So, and the river is moving pretty quick. So we're heading down there, and we got our day in. We got it done, and the wind was the wind's coming out of the north, and we're heading, the river's heading south, so we're tucked up and outside the channel, and down in parts of the river they have, they're called the wing dams, where they basically put like this diagonal wall, but it's below the surface generally. Probably right now with the low water that's going on, they're going to be sticking up, and it's rubble concrete, it's riprap, it's just big heavy stuff the river's not going to move. Well, we were tucked inside of those, and the wind's blowing, and I'm up in the V berth sleeping, and the boat's you can hear the whistling and the howling and stuff because pretty strong winds, and then I hear this big snap boom, and I'm like, oh no. So I hopped out, both of us got up there, and there's a picture later of Glider, which is Tony, which was a guy that we ran down the river with for off and on, and it's pitch black. There's no lights. There's no moon. There's nothing. We can't see our hands in front of our face. We don't know where we are. I see his lights on his boat, and we're moving from him. I made the wrong assumption that he had gotten loose. We had gotten loose is what had happened. So we immediately jumped in. Dave got up at the helm, fired up the motor, and the only thing we could have is GPS. So we need to figure out where we're at in the river and get out and get safe and stop, because we're going backwards down the river now. And we know we're near the wing dams. What we found out later is we were a matter of probably seconds from rear-ending a wing dam, which would have torn the rudder off, which would have been game over. We would have been done. We fired up the motor. Dave started going out, Well, one of the things we'd done the night before was we had done maintenance on the motor. And part of that maintenance was to change the fuel filters. So we got the fuel filters changed, purged all the air out of it, ran the motor for a while. Everything's good. We missed some air. So about the time Dave gets pulled out into the channel, the motor dies. Now we're heading back downriver again, backwards. So we had a little 9-horse motor that we'd kicker motor that we put on for whatever reason, but that's got us out of there until we could get to a point to figure out, get a second anchor put on, get secured. And again, it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. There's no light. We're stumbling around trying to get it done. Another night that could have gone very badly, and it didn't. So this is a picture after we got to Belize. Now all that rust, that's aluminum and stainless steel. That's what a shorted line. We figured out later we had a short in some of our lighting from the salt water, and that was nice and polished when 12 days before this. Another one, we saw so many different odd configurations of boats along the way and what people are living in. This is down south someplace, and just we're back on the old channel of the river, and just anchored overnight. And this is an old, I think, lock number 1. It's one of the old locks. I think that's on the Mobile River. But we were back in this backwater, and just went to shore and but we met some. The thing that stood out was the people that we met. There was and how great those people were, and they were doing similar things. Whether it was they were in a sailboat or if they were in a motorboat. We ran into a gentleman that was, I talked to him a little bit, but he had barely spoke English. He was German, and he had this little day sailor down. And we're down in Mobile, Alabama, at the marina. And I looked at this little day sailor. It's like a 23-foot boat. And I'm like, man, that thing looks like it's been through the ringer. And he was asking how to get, because he didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have a United States driver's license. He was trying to figure out how to get provisions and stuff like that. So, but what I found out later, and I never got pictures of him, but he'd crossed over the Atlantic from Germany, and this little, what we would call a day sailor, by himself, and it was a little nutty. That same one, I never got pictures of it. There was a young couple that had found a plan on the internet to build basically a floating deck bolted up to a side of a canoe with a motor on it. And they were going to go from Mobile, and they're going to New Orleans. But that means going out on the Gulf of Mexico and going around there. And it was like, I don't know that I'd do that. Here's a picture of a glider, Tony. And actually, it's funny because Tony, I actually see him probably a couple times a year. He works at one of the marine stores here, part-time. I think he's almost retired, but this was his boat. But we ran in with him a number of days along the way, so it was fun. One of the things that I don't have. So this is a picture of Cozumel. I don't have any pictures between Mobile, Alabama, and Cozumel. I think there's one more in here. Still Cozumel. So we were in Mobile, Alabama on Thanksgiving Day, and we had decided to take off on Black Friday. And the captain thought we could get ahead of some weather. I actually honestly was trying to make a decision whether I was going to step off the boat, because I didn't think it was the best decision that could be made. But we were behind on his schedule, and we needed to get going. So I could let him go or go with him. And that was kind of, it was a choice. So I ended up deciding to go. We did not get ahead of the weather. So when we hit the Gulf of Mexico, we ended up with storms for about 3 days. We had up to about 40 knots, and we had seas in the 20 plus range, and we're in a 33-foot boat. To compound that, there was a small flag line that went up the mast from the raise a flag if you go up top. That had come loose when we had re-rigged the boat. So it fouled both our mainsail and our jib, our front sail, and we couldn't take them down because they were the rope had come loose, this little 1/8-inch line, and jammed it up. So we are vastly overpowered, and with no way to get out of it, other than just ride it out. We were, at this point, I was projectile vomiting. That's where I lost the weight, mostly. There was 3 days that I couldn't keep anything down, and it's just the two of us, so I have to do the watches the best I can and try to stay awake. It got really challenging to do. There was times that I wanted it to stop, and I didn't care how it stopped. I actually got back, changed some things in my life, and that's what happens when you get to that point. And I didn't care how it stopped. It just needed to stop. So, but we did get through that, and then we were able to cut the sails loose. But in doing that, we didn't have enough fuel. We had enough for about a 500-mile crossing, but we're only about 300 miles into the 1,000-mile crossing, maybe 4. We were not sure. So that's when we started doing fuel calculations, as in trying to get a best idea how much fuel we have, and then we started actually heading for Cuba, because Cuba was going to be a bit easier shot. We didn't know where we were going to go into Cuba, but we figured that was at least, if we had to ditch, we were better over there than we were on the Mexican side, because of the currents and stuff like that. So as it's going along, one of the things we did, there's a GPS device, and remember this is 11 years ago, called Spot, and it's a satellite communication device that would send, and we didn't have two-way communication. We could say, we're fine, here's our position, and Lori and Dave's wife, they got it twice a day. And I would send it up also to the blog that I was doing, and it would tell people, so the people that were following us along knew kind of where we were. While we were in Mobile, there was one of the times it said it sent, but they never got it. So we said, you know what, that thing's a little spotty. He told us it sent, but the girls never received it. We never received the text. So we're like, oh, that seems problematic. So we told them, hey, if it doesn't show up, give it a little time. And we had it fail once. Well, as this is going on, we're still in weather, and we're not sure if we have enough fuel. We actually asked, at one point we pulled up along, if we could get fuel from a freighter out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And they kind of laughed at us, and they should have. But they had 48 hours. They didn't hear from us. So they're both in full panic. knowing about where we were at. They could see the weather in the area at the same time. So they were, they were fairly concerned. So we did get across. We saw the lights of Cuba, and then we cut across to Cozumel. We got fuel in Cozumel, and at this point we're motoring. We had one afternoon of running with the dolphins. We weren't sailing; we were motoring. So we took a sailboat 2,500 miles by motor at about 6 miles an hour. So, but we did get across. This is towards the end. This is how close we got to his dock before we ran aground for the last time. He needs a 5-foot draft on this particular boat, and that's as far as we could get. They end up coming about a week later. We finally got into the dock, and they went in there by hand in buckets, and guys standing in the water and with buckets, and that's how they dredged it down there. And then all the dredging they used to fill in and make more beach. So I don't know. It's that's kind of my story. It was an adventure. It was an adventure. So hope that you found it interesting. Next time we'll get back to some regular woodworking or building something or whatever. But yeah, so we'll see you next time.